For 250 years, America has been a bastion of freedom. As we look ahead to the next 250, we're reminded that freedom is ours to defend. Today, Alliance Defending Freedom stands in courtrooms across the country to protect those freedoms we cherish: life, free speech, religious freedom, parental rights. These freedoms are at the core of who we are as a nation, and they must be preserved. ADF is approaching a critical fiscal year-end fundraising deadline. Your support today helps ADF defend these freedoms so they may endure for many years to come. Every dollar you give will be doubled thanks to a special matching grant while funds last. Visit joinadf.com/Hanson or text Hanson to 83848 to give today. That's joinadf.com/Hanson or text Hanson to 83848.
Hello, this is Victor Davis Hanson. There's been a lot of news lately about the university's higher education in crisis. And the universities are now competing for students rather than students competing with each other to get into universities. Maybe the elite universities still, because of their brand name, although they've suffered a great deal on their admissions, reflect that, and their applications are down. They'll always make it 7 or 8 so-called top tier. But most four-year colleges and universities are in a bad strait. And why is that? First of all, it's demography. During the 1960s, the fertility rate reached in 1960 about 3.6 children per family. It's recovered a little bit the last 3 years, but it's 1.7. So the cohort of 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-olds is only about, it's less than half. So they are competing for a much smaller pool of young people. The second thing that's really turned people off is the tuition has increased the last 50 years 3 times more than the annual rate of inflation. Now, why is that? Mostly it is because of administrative bloat. Where I work at Stanford University, the Wall Street Journal recently suggested that if you count graduate and undergraduates at Stanford and you count administrators and their staff, there is roughly 1 administrator or staffer for every student. This is because the university became in loco parentis. It said, I am a parent, and I'm going to monitor the 360-degree, 24/7 life of a student. If he's not happy, we're going to deal with it. If somebody accuses you of sexual harassment, we're going to deal with everything. And we're going to try to also be political. Our job is not disinterested, inductive education. It is to turn out left-wing people who can offer an antithesis to the family, nuclear family, the community, the religion, etc. We believe society is biased with corporations and family and religion, and we're going to offer a antithesis. That turned off people, believe me. Professors themselves are unique in American life. Nobody else has the same conditions of employment. After 6 years, they get tenure. Outside the exclusive schools, it's almost automatic. Where I worked at the CSU, I think 90% of assistant professors got tenure. Release time is very common now, that you can say, I want to be a part-time administrator, or I am tutoring, or I have a special project, and you can get a reduced teaching load. Remember that the teaching load has gone way down. In most colleges, it's between 2 and 4 courses a year. Maybe not the CSU, but even CSU has gone down on many campuses that's the California State University system, the largest in the world, from 4 classes to 3 classes a semester. And part of the way that they finesse that was when you increase the administrative budget and you increase the release time for full-time faculty and decrease the teaching, you hire part-time temporary lecturers, and you exploit them. You pay them about 40% per class what you would pay a full or associate professor. You don't really give them the same type of benefits. And at some universities, the number of courses The percentage of courses that are taught by part-time exploited lecturers is getting up to 40 and even 45%. Another thing that turned the public off about these universities, they grant gouge. We're starting to learn that, say, on NIH grants, many of these universities were charging not 10 or 15% commission, but 40% and even higher. In other words, if a professor got $1 million grant from the federal government, a university would step in and say, well, you're using your office or your phone or your lab, or so, we want 40% of it. And they use that because the whole system is financially unsound, largely because, again, of administrative bloat and the creation of centers and programs that have nothing to do with education, but form a huge overhead. Another thing that got people very worried is another way they financed this debt, expanded their administrators, cut back on teaching, was they brought in over 1 million foreign students. And unlike American students, there are no scholarships. There are no discounts. Foreign students pay the premium, if not a little bit higher rate of inflation. Now, the problem with that, of tuition, the problem with that is when you bring in 300,000 students from China or over 200,000 from the illiberal Middle East, and when you look at the origin of most of these students, they are from autocratic and illiberal places in Africa, Asia, the Western Hemisphere, particularly the Middle East and China, then you start to politicize the student body. And you can see what had happened after October 7th. We had enormous demonstrations, often led by foreign students, chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's essentially code for destroying the state of Israel. And we had violent demonstrations, often led by people from the Middle East. And of course, the FBI suggests 1% to 5% of Chinese students are actively engaged in espionage. The public knows this, and they're not fond of that idea, that sometimes their children don't get into school because the universities are letting in foreign students because they pay a premium. DEI did damage, diversity, equity, inclusion. The idea that the universities, despite state referenda and Supreme Court decisions, the Civil Rights Acts, they were deliberately, consciously, insidiously using race as a barometer to admit people, to hire people, to retain people, to promote people on the basis of their superficial appearance, their sexual orientation, or their gender. It was entirely anti-meritocratic. It was like the Soviet commissar system. It was like the McCarthy period. If you wanted to get a job at a university, you had to fill out, in most cases, a diversity statement. And believe me, if you wrote on that diversity statement, honestly, I believe that DEI is anti-meritocratic, you were not going to be hired. There's another reason that these universities are in crisis. The federal government came in and guaranteed student loans. Once they did that, the universities jacked up the rate of tuition, as I said, 3 times higher on an annual basis than the inflation rate. So the government came in and said, you guys can loan students money and we will back it up. So they will pay you back with federally guaranteed dollars. And we know now that there's a 30 to 35% non-compliance rate, that people are either late or have defaulted. And so when you have $1.7 trillion in debt, and you see that the debt is increasing because the students are not graduating in 4 years, the average graduation now is 6 years, about 30 to 40% of people who enter college do not ever graduate, but the whole thing is subsidized by loans from banks that are guaranteed by the federal government, and that gave a green light for universities to offer these crazy courses that nobody wants, peace studies, race studies, black studies, environmental studies, etc., dash studies, because the students took it and the government paid for it. and nobody worried about whether they graduated or whether the employers found a well-educated and empirical product coming out with a BA. Finally, we're short a couple of million plumbers, electricians, blue-collar carpenters, sheetrockers, roofers. These are very important to the economy of the United States. But when these universities said, come to us, and maybe even if you don't graduate, 40% of you, or if those who do average 6 years, and even though you're going to run up a big debt, you can take psych and sociology. It's a good time to kind of float around, live in your basement, have a good time in your 20s. But the economy answered back, we're wasting kids' formative years in the 20s. We need master electrician. We need oil workers. We need skilled carpenters. And the irony is, if you graduate with a bachelor's degree in psychology or sociology versus you are a master electrician at the age of 22, the electrician these days is going to be making $100,000 plus. And the sociology BA, or the person with, 2 or 3 years of psychology, is either going to be unemployed or not using that education at all in his employment, or if he is hired, he will be making half of what the electrician or the roofer or the carpenter makes. Add it all up, and the universities are in bad shape, and they're in desperate need of coerced reform because they will not reform on their own. Thank you very much. Victor Davis Hanson for the Daily Signal. Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Signal. Please like, share, and subscribe to be notified for more content like this. You can also check out my own website at victorhanson.com and subscribe for exclusive features in addition.
For 250 years, America has been a bastion of freedom. As we look ahead to the next 250, we're reminded that freedom is ours to defend. Today, Alliance Defending Freedom stands in courtrooms across the country to protect those freedoms we cherish: life, free speech, religious freedom, parental rights. These freedoms are at the core of who we are as a nation, and they must be preserved. ADF is approaching a critical fiscal year-end fundraising deadline. Your support today helps ADF defend these freedoms so they may endure for many years to come. Every dollar you give will be doubled thanks to a special matching grant while funds last. Visit joinadf.com/Hanson or text Hanson to 83848 to give today. That's joinadf.com/Hanson or text Hanson to 83848.